Welcome to this lecture where we'll be updating our website template by adding a call to action section. In the last lecture, we added a features section with the animated icons to promote the products and services that our website will be advertising. In this lecture, we'll move further down the page and add a section with the aim of prompting the user to take some kind of action, such as clicking a button. This is why it's known as a call to action section. It will provide the user with a bit of important information and then try to tempt them into clicking a button which will do something or take them to a certain place. Maybe a learn more button or possibly even initiating some form of contact. If you've been coding along, then load your version of these up now. If not, you can pick up from where you left off by taking a copy of the files from the Stage 3 Features folder. You'll find these in the project folder of your course downloads under the Lectures section. I have the main index.html file loaded here, along with the supporting CSS files from the Style subfolder. Just like I did in the last lecture, I'm going to collapse some of the existing code again before we start adding anything new to the file so it doesn't get too cluttered. I'll do this with the HTML file and all of the CSS files so that we can easily see our new code as we add it. The code for this section is going to be fairly simple. So let's add it now below the features code that we wrote in the last lecture. All we need for this new section is a container div tag, a heading, a paragraph, and then a div tag styled as a button wrapped in an anchor tag so that it's clickable. Like I did before, I've given the container div a class of call to action, so that I can style it in just a moment. I've also given it an ID so that we can link a navbar option to it if we want to. There's not actually an option for it in the navbar at the moment, but you can add one yourself if you want to later on. I tend to give all of my sections an ID, just in case I want to link to it later on. Let's run this and see how it looks. Right now, because we've not styled this new section, its content appears as a heading and pretty much a plain block of text below it. Let's go back to the code window and add some CSS rules for it in our index.css file. To keep things tidy, I'll add new rules just below the ones we created for the features section. If we keep the code in the same order as it appears on the website, it makes things much easier to find and edit later on. Before we look at this code, let's run the page again to see how the CSS has changed things. Now we can see our new call to action section is using the same fixed background as the hero section, and has nice clear white text, and the clickable link at the bottom is styled as a button. If we compare the background image in the new section with the image in the hero section at the top, we'll see that it's the same image, just a little darker so the white text stands out. The fixed nature of the background image makes it look like the web page has a section cut out of it, which is showing a background layer as it scrolls. Now that we've seen what it looks like, let's nip back to the code and take a look at the CSS code to see how it works. First of all, I styled the section's main container div, which was given a class of call to action. Here, I'm saying that I want the text to be white, and then setting up some margins and padding around the text to give it space. Next comes the interesting part. Here, I'm setting the background image, but unlike previous times, I'm setting an image URL, while at the same time setting up a linear gradient over the top of it. The image URL is pretty self-explanatory as it simply points to the background image file. The linear gradient though is what makes it darker. There are several ways to achieve this, but I've opted to use a linear gradient together with the RGBA function to give me control over the gradient's opacity. The linear gradient function takes three parameters: the direction of the gradient, a starting colour, and a finishing colour. Using these three, I can create a gradient that transitions from one colour to the other in the specified direction. In this case though, I've asked for the gradient to run from top to bottom, and I've used the same colour of black with a 50% opacity as both start and end colours. This applies a consistent 50% black overlay to the whole image, which gives it that slightly darker look. Of course, I didn't have to do this. I could have left off the gradient altogether and just used the image URL. However, in order to draw more attention to the content, I wanted the white text to really stand out. so making the background image slightly darker did exactly that. The next few lines in this rule are all background related, and they're all doing the same thing as we did in the hero section. They're making the background image fixed so that it doesn't scroll, letting the browser determine the correct size so that it covers the full background area, setting its anchor point to the top right and making sure that it doesn't repeat. Setting these to the same values as the hero section means the same background image appears behind both hero and call to action sections, and gives the page that cool parallax effect. Feel free to play around with these values if you wish, but I personally like this look. The next two rules style the heading and paragraph tags within the section and simply set the text sizes, margins and paddings. And that's it. With not a lot of code, we've successfully added our call to action section. Let's quickly look back at the code now so that you can see what we've added in this lecture. If you're coding along, feel free to pause the video and check to make sure that your code and mine are the same. If you want to compare code, you'll also find a copy of these code files in your course downloads in the Stage 4 Call to Action folder within the project section. Next up, we're going to be adding a portfolio section where we can show off any projects that we're proud of. So when you're ready, head on over to that lecture and we'll look at the HTML and CSS needed.